So how you been? I mean, you're in Chicago, right? Well, first of all, thank
Yes.
you, Emma Moris, for coming
Yes.
on. I've been wanting to have you on since like what last. What do I need chapstick to? uh, I've been wanting to have you on since what, like last summer we talked about it,
Yeah,
right?
you mentioned it last time I was in Vegas, and then I just kind of forgot about it. But yeah,
And
I'm excited.
yeah, I mean, you're a teacher, or were a teacher in Chicago. You work both public
Yes.
and charter. We'll get to that. But I mean, you're in Chicago. What side of the city are you on? I mean, what is your whole take on this? Well, actually, because I'm about to ask you your take, right? I want to mention something that you brought up during the setup, right there during the preparation. That I asked you to come on because I heard what happened to you. We'll get to that. But you said, well, I don't know if this is the right moment. I want people to know this, You're like, I don't know if this is the right moment, for someone like me, white girl, to come on and maybe you should have, we should be hearing from black voices and stuff like that. And I mean, that's really admirable. That's, you are one of these white people who get it, and there's a lot of them, we have to get to the majority, but we'll work on it. But, and what I told you is that because maybe people are going to be watching this and they're going to say, yeah, why does he, with everything that's going on, why does he have this white girl, right? But what I told you, I'm not really worried about I mean, if you see on my podcast, I have a lot of Latinos, and that's not even by design. That's just because I reach out to whoever's around me, whoever interests me, and they just happen to be majority Latino, right?
Yeah.
'Cause that's just the way America is, right? We're all in our bubbles. But me, I'm Afro-Latino, right? So I figure I have that covered. This show is diversity, right? And the other thing I told you is that I just whoever interests me and I want to talk to them and I think they have something important and interesting to say, I'm going to reach out to them. I don't think about the race, ethnicity, again, because maybe I think I have it covered with me. But two, I mean, it works itself out, I think it's kind of silly to think like that. And I get why people want people to think like that, but I just wanted to mention that you were the one who were like, I don't think I should come on right now.
Yeah, I just didn't want my voice to be clogging the space right now. Like my experiences right now, a white woman, I just feel like I wanted to make sure I wasn't taking space away from other people and other stories that are like way more important than just like me, one white teacher in Chicago.
Well, I mean, again, we're all in our bubbles, right? And I know a lot of Latino and black people who just don't like white people, right? Generally, because of what the media says and what the way the environment is, right?
Well, unfair. Like
Right.
white people have shown like minority groups throughout history that they are a problem and they continue to do that. So like, I totally get that and understand.
Yeah, Malcolm
So
X
I
has this
just-
thing of like, if I know snakes bite, right? If I see a bunch of rattlesnakes and some of them are not poisonous, or snakes, some of them are not poisonous, some of them are. I'm not going to welcome them all in just assuming that they're all poisonous. I know some of them are, so I have to be afraid of all snakes. And not to say that white people are snakes, but I'm just saying like, for black people and brown people, I mean, it's tantamount to the same thing. I'm never going to get bit by a snake probably, but I have been the victim of, white racism.
Yeah. And that's like, I don't know. I think that's why right now I'm trying with everything that's going on just to do my best to like be listening more and reflecting more as a white person about like, what could I bring that's actually helpful to the Black Lives Matter movement as opposed to just talking about my own experience as an ally. Cause that's not important. That's not important to me.
Yeah. And I'm not here to, speak for all black people and all Latinos, obviously. Speaking for myself, for me, that's what I want from white people, right? Just to say, I want the world that you want. I want to change this, right? I understand that, my side, it has a lot of blame and that we created this system and that you're going to need our help to take it down, to dismantle it. But I don't know exactly what you want me to do, what you want me to say, where you want me to be. I'm willing and able. And that's the attitude, right? That's all we need. Because, you've probably seen like black protesters say like, there's black protesters who are saying, I don't know we're mad, right? We're out here protesting, but what exactly do we want? What are our demands? I mean, there's some, right? Community policing and stuff like that, but beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I do know that I want to say Black Lives Matter themselves, they posted like calls to action of like things, specifically things that they want. And I've seen like a lot of really helpful info, like for me specifically as a white woman, like on Instagram and just circulating of like how, like the correct way to be an ally that actually helps helps the situation rather than like draw attention inward. And I feel like that's been super, super helpful. Just things like, I don't know, like making sure you're not posting any identifying photos of people at protests, you know, like to keep other people safe, like make sure you're not talking about your own experience, like point out resources to help other people and things like that. And just like a lot more reflecting and listening than like needing to be out there on the front lines, like leading the charge and having your voice about your, like these ideas be what's heard. So I think that's really what white people
have you marched or been in any of the protests?
I haven't gone out yet. No, because that was like another thing that I was debating with myself about, because I didn't want to just go out there with no purpose at all, just to kind of be standing and like speaking myself. Like if I went, I wanted it to be like for a purpose, like have an action plan in place. So my roommates and I did have a conversation where we talked about going to the next one and like arriving with supplies, like dropping off water bottles, like bringing snacks, like different things like that. But at this point, I haven't like gone out myself and done anything.
No, I mean, I've just the same way. Me and Rocio feel the same way. Like, you know, we're in solidarity, and maybe this is we need bodies, right? You do need to march
for sure.
But as a writer, as somebody, you know, who's been talking about this for years, I don't feel as much guilt as a lot of people are like, I need to go out. If you haven't written, if you haven't confronted racism in your everyday life yet, and you're just now waking up to this and you want to help, march. And you don't know what to do, march. But for us,
and I would.
We were
I don't want to cut you off. Keep going.
No. For us, I just wanted to mention this. Like for us, like we're kind of new to Vegas still. I mean, I know we've been here for almost 4 years, but we still like feel like we're from Chicago. Had I been in Chicago, there's more of a history. Everybody knows Chicago PD, right? I don't know about Las Vegas PD. I have no real history with them.
Right. And I think just in general to what you said about like people aren't feeling guilty, I feel like if your only reason for being at these protests is because you yourself don't want to feel guilty, then you're there for the wrong reasons and you're not helping at all. Amen. You're actually just distracting from what's going on. So like, I feel like if you're only going because you want to show other people you stand with Black people or like you're an ally, then maybe it's time to stay home and like reflect inward about how you yourself might be complicit as well as a white person, you know?
Yeah. And we're so emerged, we're so hooked by social media that you got to think that a lot of people, Black, white, Latino, whatever, there's a lot of people in these marches just for the video, right? Just for the Instagram story or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I saw this video of this, like, I think she was Asian, some Asian girl, like maybe 21, something like that. And she was posing with a drill, acting like she was drilling a thing. And she had the guy whose shop it was drilling take the picture of it, you know? And she's like just pretending like she's boarding up. And then she's like, oh, thank you. And then she gets in. She's with some guy. They're driving a Mercedes truck and they drive away. So it's not even her shop. She didn't drill. She didn't do anything. She just did it for the pic.
Yeah. And I think that's really harmful too. And yeah, it's
kind of the problem, right?
Like
you don't understand what's happening right now.
No, what's happening right now isn't trendy to get like an Instagram photo. It absolutely shouldn't be. We're talking about people that are getting murdered and like brutalized and oppressed every single day. Yeah. So like getting a cute picture or like a picture that shows your support isn't the point.
Yeah. I guess let's get into your story, right? I mean, I love teachers. Everybody who knows me, like they know that I'm always like harping. You know, I'm this like hardcore anarchist talking about Marx and Bakunin and all this stuff. And then I go, but it all comes down to the education system, right? It comes down to the education system because you need citizens to be able to separate fact from fiction, right from wrong, right? Morality is tied to intelligence, right? Because you have to know how to. Right, critical. You have to know how to think critically to know what the right thing to do is in every situation. Right?
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then you're gonna a bad public education system leads to bad morals in the public. And so I wanted to talk to you because you've worked both in Chicago public schools and the charter system, which I think is, I mean, so key, right, to what's going on with public education everywhere. But Chicago's kind of like has been at the forefront of this encroachment of charter schools. So first, I mean, I don't know where you want to start.
Well, I don't know. I could just, I don't know. I'll just go.
Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so I've taught in Chicago. I'm about to be finishing up my third year teaching. My first year I taught in Inglewood. I was teaching second grade, and yeah, that was,
which most people don't. If you're not from Chicago or don't know about Inglewood, it sounds like the Inglewood from LA, and it's kind of the same thing, right? It's a troubled neighborhood.
Neighborhood on the south side of Chicago that primarily served like Black students. And yeah, that was my first year teaching. But I did not like working at that school, not because I didn't like the kids or anything like that. Like, I absolutely loved my job as a teacher, but I really disliked the administration there. And it just like led to a lot of frustration and like me not being able to do my job and like the way I felt would be most effective.
Why did you become a teacher? I mean, because I know some teachers, and some of them are in it for the spring break, right? Or the summer break. I mean, 3 months off. Well, and I know they are. That's what that's really what they're in it for, right? And they hate kids. I know a teacher who hates kids, right? And she teaches kids. But so why did you get into teaching? Why did you want to be a teacher?
I wanted to get into teaching just because I've always, like, throughout college, just different jobs I've had, whether it was like coaching gymnastics, working at a summer camp, I always enjoyed just like interacting with kids. And I've always found their just like innate curiosity about everything, just like so like entertaining, as well as like, that's what I was drawn to, just like the curiosity of children, just to like make sense of everything around them and like learn how to interact with other people. Like, I was just so drawn to like being a part of that process and like fostering an environment where like kids could learn and develop like in the best way possible.
I mean, I've seen it said by like artists and philosophers and stuff like that you're supposed to grow up and not lose that childlike wonder and curiosity and to see everything for the first time. As adulthood, we tend to think of adulthood as like becoming jaded, becoming cynical. And no, like when you're a kid, you actually have it right. You actually have it right how you're supposed to be. And it's actually the world that tends to fuck you up later on.
Right. Like, kids ask questions about everything, even if it doesn't make sense, just to learn more. And like, just the other day, I was talking to one of my students on the phone, and we were like practicing spelling, and he stopped me to say that he had a question. I was like, "Oh, what's up?" And he was like, "So, Miss Moris, how does the earth just stay up there in the sky?" like he's like, "Is it God holding it up?" Like, he had all these different questions.
It's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah. And like, we just popped off then for like 20 minutes talking about things like gravity, all this other stuff. But like, it's questions like that make me love working with children.
Yeah, I mean,
just
when you're older, you have to take shrooms to be able to ask questions like that, right? Like, where am I? What is the earth, man? But that's exactly how you're supposed to think. Like, we take it for granted that we're on this giant rock, that we don't even think about it.
Yeah, and I would argue that's why so many like adults end up growing up like being so, what's the word? Like, not like uptight, and like they can't see the world from other perspectives because they don't ask questions. They like just listen to what they're told, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, you get planted in your position, in your shoes, in your eyeballs. That's how, however you see it, that's how it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, so Englewood, they put you in Englewood, right? They do that a lot with teachers in Illinois, right? I mean, do they do that everywhere? But I know in Illinois, they'll send you to like a really rough school.
No, that was like the school I interviewed at. I went to like an open house in Chicago, and they had just like a bunch of schools in the area that were hiring. And I like just passed out my resume, and they were one that called me back. So it was the first interview I ever went on, and they gave me the job right there. So I mean,
had you ever even been to Inglewood before that?
No.
Yeah,
I didn't.
Especially if you're from where'd you grow up?
New Lenox. It's a suburb like right near Joliet. Out.
Right. So I mean,
yeah. So like,
and especially when you're from the suburbs, when you go to the city, you're on the north side, maybe the west side, but you're never on the south side.
The Bean is where the city, you know, like that's the only city that exists to like people from the suburbs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't until I moved here that I actually like developed a relationship with other parts of the city, I guess.
And then what did you think of the school? I mean,
well, like I mentioned, that first school in Inglewood, I really struggled there just because I felt like no one was willing to listen to me as a first-time teacher with like different ideas I had. They were like very just focused on making sure kids were like sitting quietly in their desks all day, like doing the work, like, and like, that's just not my style of teaching. Like, I don't know. I'm a much more like organized chaos is okay, like free form. And they just like I never felt comfortable like teaching the way I wanted to. Like, I felt like I just had to like be reciting this like lesson that was given to me in their curriculum, and I wasn't allowed to like go beyond that.
There's this theory that like they're programming you to a certain way of being. Like there's this theory that school is exactly like work later, right? And exactly like prison, right? There's a bell, you go here, you eat in the cafeteria, you don't talk back, you don't make noise, you don't make a ruckus. And so I mean, if prison isn't a conducive environment for learning, then certainly school isn't.
Yeah, no,
the way it's so taught now.
Oh yeah, there's so many like, yeah, students, especially like first, second graders, 6-year-olds they shouldn't know how to sit down for an hour straight and listen to someone speak. Like that is just, it doesn't make sense. But then that would be what my school wanted me to do. And then of course there'd be massive behavior issues in the classroom. And then I would be getting blamed for why my kids aren't behaving. But it's like, if you're not setting these kids up in an environment that they'll be successful in, like you can't expect a different outcome.
Right. And then you hear about these like so-called rich schools, like a lot of private kindergartens and stuff where they'll go like, they'll take the kids to the park for the afternoon and they'll talk about like, the teacher will talk about trees and stuff. They don't do that on the south side, do they? I mean, it's almost like they're like, okay, we have these animals coming in. It's like a circus. Like you're training them. You're not teaching them. You're training them.
I think part of the problem with what you're talking about is how like you see like those kinds of learning experience taking place as like in richer areas. Like it absolutely has to do with how schools are funded, like in Illinois, Chicago. It all has to do with like the amount of money you get from the federal government has to do with how your school's rated, and your school gets rated based on like NWEA scores, which is the standardized test that kids take at the end of the year. So like if schools are like in neighborhoods like on the south side, west side of Chicago, that they really depend on that federal funding, and they just don't have the ability really if their scores aren't meeting that.
Yeah.
And then rather, I don't know. It's really frustrating to.
And then the way schools are funded by like the people around the school. So obviously rich people are going to live by themselves and fund their school so that their kids have the best education, and poor people won't be able to fund their school, so their kids won't have a good education, great opportunities. And then since we have different races, that gives an incentive to like, let's mark these people, black people, as poor so they can live in poor communities. They have poor schools. Their kids will never get a good education. They'll never rise up. They'll never get good jobs. They'll never rise, you know? They'll just be ignorant, and we can control them.
Yeah,
and
which is heartbreaking.
I think that you should just, like I said it on another podcast, I think, a while ago, that every time you go to McDonald's, you expect uniformity, right? This McDonald's is like the McDonald's in California, like the McDonald's in fucking, maybe not in Shanghai, but you know what I mean. But then schools in a town, they'll be all different, all different quality, all different, you know, everything.
Yeah, and every single school is different. Every single school operates in a different way. I think Common Core was something that tried to like evenly spread it out, but even that, it's like
explain Common Core. I mean, I'd heard it said that it was kind of like remix of No Child Left Behind?
Well, Common Core is basically just like a list of standards that are set for every single grade level, K-12, I believe. And it just like in every single subject area. So like, for example, like a first grade math standard would be like students can fluently add numbers between 1 and 20. So like saying the standard that every student in the classroom should be able to do by the end of their first grade. And there's a whole bunch of them, like for math, reading, speaking, language, just across all grade levels, and like that most states now subscribe to. So the goal there was that, so like the content or like the place, like the knowledge that everyone's ending up with across the board should be the same. But I don't know, there's a lot of pushback against Common Core because it does a lot of things like feed the need for these standardized tests, which are problematic in their own right.
And I've heard it said that you can't standardize education, especially across a country as big as the United States, right? People in Maine, for whatever reason, are going to learn. The kids in Maine are going to learn differently than the kids in Minnesota. Environment has a lot to do with education, right? I mean,
for sure,
a place where kids live.
Your vocabulary, what you see around you, what you experience. I remember this year on the NWEA that my kids took in the winter, I was just like walking around looking at some of the questions, and one student was asked like, which of these items would you take camping? And they were given pictures of like just like different items, like a tent, matches, and like they had no idea what that was. Like they live in Chicago, Illinois. They don't camp on the reg. Like they don't have access to that kind of vocabulary or understanding. Like those aren't lived experiences they have.
Yeah, I mean that's why they're getting rid of the SAT and stuff like that, right? Because like I remember I had my friend. Shout out to my friend Vlad. Maybe he doesn't want me to say his name, but he probably does. He was a valedictorian of our school, right? He had the highest GPA in the history of the school, but he was a Ukrainian immigrant, right? He had come when he was 7 or something like that. And he would say, like, he's the smartest kid, but he's like, these analogies in this SAT prep are so weird. I don't understand them because I'm from the Ukraine. I don't, like warm apple pie or something. I don't know what that, stuff like that is cultural. It's not has nothing to do with
cultural, colloquial terms, like things like that. And it just really, it caters to like very specific types of people being able to thrive on those types of things, like tests, which is sad.
Yeah. So, I mean, what happened at Englewood? How did you go to charter school?
I chose to leave there just because I was so unhappy. I didn't want to teach there again. I left them on like decent terms. I just wanted to find a different school. And I then stumbled upon the school that I worked at for then the next 2 years teaching first grade. And this school is in Austin on the west side.
A lot of charter schools out there, right?
Yeah, there's a lot like East Humboldt, or West Humboldt rather,
right.
Like West Humboldt,
all the way to the
area.
Brickyard, right?
Yeah. But I had remembered hearing about this school when I was first applying after graduating college at that like whatever thing I went to, job fair, and so I just like followed up when I knew I was looking for jobs. They had an opening. I just went on one interview. What I liked about this school was that it was a new charter school. It had only been open for 3 years before I started working there. And why I found that appealing at the time was because I was so frustrated at how established the school I had been at was, that they weren't listening to me and my new ideas. So I felt that like coming into a newer school, they're still kind of like building and like getting their footing so they'd be more receptive to people coming in. So that's kind of really what drew me into that. And they just, they seemed a lot more just like understanding and like treated you like a human being, not just someone that clocked in and clocked out every day.
And that's the argument that they make and people make for charter schools, right? Like that, the public school system is terrible. It's stuck in its ways. The teachers union has too much power and it's ruining education. Let's start these charter schools. They're new and they're fancy buildings and fancy teaching methods and free. But I mean, as we've come to find out, like, I don't know if this was true at yours, but they don't take in all the kids in their area, right? It's you have to test to get in or some way. and the teachers, at least until recently, it's probably still true, aren't unionized, right? Can't unionize, and they just, they have good outcomes, but they don't take on troubled kids. Is the argument against them?
Yeah, and like from my experience with charter schools, there was no test that students have to take to get in. They could come from anywhere as long as they had a Chicago address. If like we had open enrollment, they were allowed to be enrolled in the school. But what I found to be true, especially of like independent charters that are new, the people that tend to have the most power over what's going on in that school are like the wealthier people whose money was put at stake to develop that school, so
because it's more of a business, right? It's more of an enterprise, right?
Exactly. I definitely felt at some point like that I was not working at a school, but more of like an education factory.
Creepy.
Like throughout my experience there, just because, yeah, like it was, everything had to get approved by the CEO of the school. I maybe saw him walking around the building one time. Like he had never stepped foot in any of like my classroom in the 2 years I was there. But then he would be telling us that we don't need more teacher aid or teacher support in first grade.
Yeah. And he's looking at the balance sheet and he's just thinking of costs.
And so like I had the best intentions going into this school. I thought it was going to be the best place for me. Like I thought that this was a place where like I could speak my mind and like talk to admin if I thought things were not going well for me, and like I wouldn't be like blamed in any way, or like I don't know.
Right.
But so
almost like a startup kind of vibe, or where you get that vibe of so like everybody's ideas matters. We want to hear from everybody.
Like we all matter. We're human beings. Like I'm not your boss. We could just kind of talk to each other about how we feel, kind of thing. And that was my initial impression, but definitely sitting in a different place now. Because they called me at like not too long ago, my principal, to tell me that, oh, sorry, Miss Moris, we're not renewing your contract for next year. It's been a great experience. Do you have any questions about when your last paycheck will be or when your benefits are up? And then like pushed me off the phone, like had nothing more to say to me, nothing else. And like the last conversation prior I had with her was before like anything with COVID happened, when we were still working in the building. I sat her down for a meeting to talk about how 30 kids in a class with one teacher was becoming too much. And I needed to know that for next year, I'd get a teacher aide. And then she talked to me all about that. She asked me if I wanted to stay in first grade or if I'd be happier in a different grade. We had this whole conversation about next year. And then the next time I spoke to her, she was like firing me, pushing me off the phone. Yeah. So
I mean, and for people who maybe aren't aware of like exactly what charters are, I mean, for the most part, I mean, they are owned by a company. There's some kind of company behind them, right? And they run a school, right? They have a charter to run a school. But they're really profit driven, right? They take state funds, right? They take public funds, but they make private profit, right? And so they're all about, since they're a company and not a school is not trying to make a profit, right?
No, and I don't even know for certain that they might be a nonprofit, but what ends up happening is charter schools, part of their funding comes from the federal government and part of it comes from private donors, whereas public schools, their entire funding comes federally and from the state government. None of it comes from private donors. So charters have to balance like appeasing to the rich people who are putting money into the school, as well as making sure their test scores look good on paper to get that chunk of federal money as well. And another way that you could get federal money is per head. So depending on how many kids are in a classroom, you get money allocated to you from the government per head.
So there's an incentive there to cram the classrooms.
Right. So
even though all studies for 10, 20 years now have shown that smaller classroom sizes.
There is not a single piece of current educational research that indicates in any way that large class size helps. It in fact just hurts. It hurts on a social emotional level. It hurts on an academic level. Like, it's just not good.
Yeah. I mean, and the way you describe the charter is the way really CPS is operating, right? Because they're trying to appease rich neighborhoods too, right? That's why the north side has better schools than the south side, but they just run more schools. But they're doing it on a larger scale than, say, an independent charter, trying to appease the white patrons. I mean, yeah. And so what kind of ridiculous things, what kind of things, working at a charter school where you're like, is this teaching? Is this education? They give you these core curriculum standards, right? And you have to just meet them however.
Well, what frustrated me the most about this school is that they talked a big game. They talked about how, like, we are going to use the best teaching practices. We are not just focused on like teaching these kids how to succeed on a test. Like, we want to teach them in a holistic way to like, so that we know that they're good people when they go out into that world. But then I would be told that I only have 20 minutes a day or like 20 minutes a week to talk about anything social emotional. Other than that, I had to be sticking to the script of the reading curriculum and math curriculum every single day. So it's like, you can't preach in your mission that you're teaching this holistic child, but then actually the schedule for the day looks like a quick 10-minute lesson on Wednesdays just to check off that box for SEL, even though it's not actually doing anything to the kids.
Yeah.
And I feel like I tried to speak up and like hold this administration accountable in ways that they did not want anyone paying attention to. Like, they didn't want people complaining about class size because they had no intention of ever changing that. Like, they didn't want people complaining that we only had one social worker for 500 plus students. Like, on the west side of Chicago, like, people, like, they didn't want those complaints because those complaints cost money to fix,
That's crazy. I mean, and that the thing, especially becoming an adult or growing up, you learn like, man, how adults lie, just straight up lie. They're not even like, they know they're lying. And especially with business, like a business has is not obligated to tell the truth, right? They just want to make a profit. They'll tell the truth if lying cuts into their profits.
Yeah.
And even then they'll just be like, oh, it's worth, I'll still lie because it's worth a few $1 million that I'm losing. They have no incentive to tell the truth.
Yeah. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I was naive in thinking that like
we all are
people
kids,
don't
man.
communicate like that. But like, I am the type of person where like, I'm very comfortable being honest with other people, especially like in a work setting where like I had someone who was like my direct instructional coach. Her sole job was to like instruct and help teachers do their job and teach them how to be better at their job. And like, I went 2 whole years where like she never said nothing but nice things about what I was doing. She had no problems with what I was doing in the classroom. And then all of a sudden, like, there was this list of reasons of why I'm getting fired.
And they just come up with it.
Right. Like, they let me go. And then, like I said, they pushed me off the phone in a quick conversation. I reached back out to my principal because I said that I wanted to have a better understanding of like what happened and like why I'm being let go. And she did. And then I like told her about how I felt it was because like I had brought concerns about the school to her, and she just like thought it was easier to get rid of me than like, and she kept saying, no, that wasn't the case, that they had to let me go because, sometimes I wouldn't start my guided reading groups on time. I might start them 10 minutes later than we were supposed to. But like, you're really going to fire someone because they started a lesson 10 minutes late.
and that's what companies do, right? Like at Amazon, that guy in New York who was like saying, hey, this is what's wrong with Amazon. They get rid of that person thinking they get rid of the problem.
Right.
But when one person speaks up, that's because like 10 other people or 20 other people are thinking the same thing and not saying it.
Like, I wasn't the only one who thought these things about the school. Like, when we would go out for drinks on a Friday, 10, 15 other teachers would be saying the same thing. I was just probably the only one who was actually saying it to admin's face. So like, they had an enemy.
But it's the same thing with like these. Look how it ties to these protests, right? People probably see the protests and they'll see thousands of people. They're like, those people are crazy. There's millions of other people who aren't marching, but who agree with those protesters, right? So you can beat them up and lock them up or shut them up, but you're not getting rid of the problem. And we all agree it's a problem. We're just not, most of the people who agree are not in the street.
Yeah.
And so just like with you, like most of the teachers agreed with you, but you were the only one saying it. And so it doesn't make sense to me why they would get rid of you and not fix the problem, because it's a problem.
Well, money.
Yeah.
Everything comes down to money. Yeah. And I think they made a lot of comments how I did not like push the academic side of my teaching as much as I pushed like social emotional learning. But like, I believe in meeting kids where they're at. So like if I have a group of 6-year-olds who like have no coping skills for their emotions whatsoever and like are tantruming and fighting with each other, like I'm not going to be struggling through that while they're yelling and screaming at me running around the classroom to teach them math. Like we need to do some other things right now, maybe some deep breathing or like something different. But like, and I feel like they were not about that. I learned to find out, but they let me do it for 2 entire years without speaking up or saying a word to me that it was a problem, and then fired me for it.
Just by having a soft hand with kids having a tantrum?
Yeah. They said I wasn't pushing the urgency of academics hard enough. But like,
wow, that is some evil ass language. Jesus.
Yeah.
Wait, say it again.
I wasn't pushing the urgency of academics hard enough. Like I was like, wow. I was too soft on them. Like I cared too much about who they were as
get them in line. That's all that means. Get them in line.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, that's not my style. That's not my style. Like, yeah.
That's how people talk. Like when they're saying like, we need to get the protests and we need to control the protests. They'll say something like that, where it's like, we need to have the best interests of democracy in our, they're just saying like, no, we're going to beat up protesters, And that's the system. The system, that's the system talking in your charter school. It's everywhere. I try to tell people like, the system's not this thing in the sky or somewhere in DC. It's everywhere. It's like in every minute of your life. It's how you think. It's trained you since you were a baby by what you saw and heard and everything around you, right?
Yeah. And it's just like, it breaks my heart, honestly, because
it does, man. It's tiring.
My kids, this class I had this past year was by far my favorite class I've ever had as a teacher. And like, just thinking about those beautiful kids, like knowing that their education from this point on depends on the people in charge of that school. Like it's heartbreaking to me because they deserve so much better, so much better.
And it's like it's almost like you're, in a way, a teacher's like a foster parent in a way for like a year, right? Because you become a third parent for this kid, or sometimes a second parent, right? And you love them, and then to know that you're sending them off to now, basically an orphanage where they're not going to be cared for at all, right?
Right,
just their basic needs.
Yeah, and like I loved being at the same school 2 years in a row, because then my first graders who are now second graders, like we would still eat lunch together, like I would go help them out if I knew they were having a hard time. Like there was this one boy who was in my school or my class in first grade really struggled. He was struggling a lot in second grade. So like he was getting in fights a lot. So I would go up there on my preps, and like he was really good at pulling teeth. It sounds weird, but that would gross me out, pulling teeth, but he loved to do it. So then I like made him like my class dentist. So anytime a kid had like a loose tooth, I would bring them up to second grade.
Watch him grow up to be a dentist though.
And like let him pull their teeth, and like he loved it. And like, I don't know, but apparently that was just me wasting time, not prioritizing the urgency of academics.
He's going to remember that. Everybody's going to remember that, right? I mean, like I said, watch him become a dentist. But I mean, what happens to you now? I mean, you got to think there's some kind of dossier on you. This teacher believes in decent education for every child. We got to do something about her.
Yeah. I don't really know what's next for me. I'm not in any hurry to get another teaching job right now. I think I'm going to take the year off, just kind of reassess what I want to do. Because like the thought of getting another job at a school with an admin that I feel frustrated by, that just seems so exhausting. I don't want to do that to myself again. Like, I don't ever want to be working as a teacher because I need a job. If I'm ever working in a school again, it's because I want that job, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know what's next for me.
And that's, you know, the reason capitalism has us by the balls, because a lot of people, most people can't make the decision, right? Wherever you can get a job, not even in a school, whatever job you can get, janitor, whatever, you take it because you don't know when you can get a job.
And that's been my mentality. Like out of college, I was like, I'm so terrified I'm not going to get a job when I graduate. Right. First interview, accepted the first job I was given at a school. Same thing. I knew I didn't like that school. I wanted a new job so bad. Then first interview I went on, I accepted this new job at the school I was just at. So like, I don't want to do that to myself again.
Well, that's why they consider 2% unemployment, zero unemployment, because the capitalist system always needs people without a job, because those people are desperate. And the people who have the job are like, I can't complain or else they're going to replace me with one of those people who don't have a job. And so you don't complain. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll figure something out. I'm getting paid till July 31st. Nice. So got a few more paychecks left.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I'll probably figure out just some odd way to make money. And then, I don't know, more go back to school. I've been thinking about maybe transitioning more into like the social work side of working with kids, or even potentially like more mental health, like working like counseling. Because that way I wouldn't have to be teaching kids how to read or do math. Like I would only be able to work on like them,
really helping
as a human
them,
being.
counseling them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't know if I'm gonna, considering the moment we're in and that I have you and we're friends. I'm gonna turn this into Ask a White Person. I mean, what do you think's going on with these white people who don't get racism, right? They think that black people are out of control, that there's no such thing as racism. Obama proved that, right? A black president proved that. What do you think's going on?
A lot, just ignorance, I guess, not understanding. A lot of white people,
they don't know.
A lot of white people only grow up around other white people, so they're only taught about life, like not from the lens of anyone else. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm a white person. I grew up in a mostly white community. I figured it out. So like,
no, like, yeah, I mean,
and like, I'm not even trying to like,
right.
Not saying that for clout in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying like,
you're doing it for clout.
Like, I'm just saying that like if I just feel like I could read articles, like I could take the time to reflect on my own life and learn about other people's, like other people could do it too. They just don't know how. I don't know. I don't want to speak for everyone. I just feel like I wish more white people would just take more time right now to just reflect on how they themselves have been complicit in white supremacy. Because there is no white person in America, not even me, who it has not done that. And like, unless you're willing to confront and admit that to yourself, and like with the commitment to always keep learning and doing better, like you're part of the problem. So like, it's going to hurt. You're probably going to feel bad about yourself, guilty, ashamed, but like, that's the price you pay for being in charge of everything.
Right. And I mean, you it's our country. We all kind of feel ashamed, right? We feel ashamed that that we're maybe not us because we're young, but you got to think our parents and our grandparents, like, man, look what we left our kids. Look what we left this generation. But what was I going to say? I was going to say, like everybody's ignorance and everybody's education is their own responsibility. Like, I get that people are ignorant. They don't know. They haven't been exposed, right? But you have it, what you know and what you don't know is your responsibility. And
Absolutely.
If you don't know something, you have to go find it out. You have to ask those questions.
Yeah. And like, ignorance isn't an excuse anymore. Because the moment you yourself realize you're ignorant about something, that should be a signal to you that you need to learn more.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, continuing to use ignorance as an excuse just isn't okay.
And the internet makes ignorance, almost no excuse, because
Like if
Ask
I
Google.
could Google
Ask
search
Siri.
something, anyone can.
Siri,
So,
what is the history of racism in America? I mean, boom, you know?
yeah.
And if you
there's
can
so
binge
many-
watch whatever
there's
shows, you
just
can
so
binge
many
watch
great
documentaries.
resources out there. Yeah, like podcasts, like things on Netflix. Like there's so many different resources that you could have, and just I don't know.
Well, then it's got to be, you know, somebody mentioned to me the book White Fragility. And that's an old, you know, they asked me if I read it. I haven't read it, but it's an old concept, right? Of like, you know, a lot of white people, like you said, like they don't want to ask those, like, is racism real? Because then that hurts, right?
Because then
Especially if
they
you're
know
white.
that they've done something wrong, or people they love around them are continuing to do things wrong,
Right.
and that might shatter their bubble a little bit.
Or that they're benefiting from this evil system, right? Like, oh man, like they look around their house and they see that they have a nice house and they have a nice job, a nice family, everybody's healthy, and they're like, is that because I'm white? What if I was black? What if I was undocumented, right? There was on Finding Your Roots, Meryl Streep was on, and she, you know, she got her DNA tested. Turns out somebody in her family was a Nazi. And she was like, you saw her flushed, right? Like, you know, but it's like, calm down. You're not a Nazi, but that's how people feel, right? It's your ancestors.
But yeah, I feel like you just gotta, like, guilt or feeling shame doesn't mean you should lock it away in a box and never talk about it again. If you feel that way, it's probably because you need to be addressing it and talking about it and reflecting a lot more.
Yeah, that's a great message. If you want to get rid of your guilt, and this goes for anybody about anything, if you want to get rid of your guilt, examine that guilt. Why is it there? Don't bury it.
Don't
It's
run
going to
from it.
destroy
Don't
you.
suppress it, because then you're just doing it wrong.
Well, that was a really great conversation. I want to thank you for coming on. I mean, if people want to find you on social media to blast you, I'm not saying, you know, I'm sure people are going to listen to this and think like, oh, that's a really good teacher. Because that's what you're the kind of teacher that I wouldn't be surprised if you got snatched up by another school, because that's the kind of, what you said is what we expect teachers to think and feel and want to be, you know?
Yeah, I just wish there was more room for that to be the case. Like in our, you know, I wish there was more room for teaching.
And there's a lot of good teachers, but we just don't hear from them, right?
Oh, for sure. There's so many good teachers, like,
Right.
who want to do this the right
All
way.
over, yeah.
Just school administrations could be really, really frustrating.
Yeah, so now you're dealing with a school administration. That's frustrating. Dealing with kids, man. Everybody's you know, all these parents who are working from home now with their kids, they're finding out, damn, teachers, we need to double their pay ASAP.
Oh yeah, after field trips, parents would be like, "Oh my God, Miss Morris, like, how do you do this? Like, I couldn't handle 6 of them walking around the museum. How do you deal with 30?"
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm struggling.
Yeah, I mean, teachers are the most, you know, I guess besides soldiers, because they defend the country, but teachers are the most important civil servants there are, because they are building the future. Whatever they teach kids will become the future of the country.
Yeah. So if you want to help people, don't become a police officer. Become a therapist, teacher, doctor, nurse.
Or if I know police officers. My dad was one. I have a cousin that's one. If you're a police officer, I understand that not. You know, I don't like the badge. I'm not against people, right? I'm against the badge. What it's become, right? What it's become. This power between that's defending the system, a racist system against the people. The people want to protest the system, and cops are standing in the way and beating them down for it. So if you're a cop and you don't agree with this bullshit, you got to step up like you did at the fucking charter school. We need teachers like you. We need cops that are like you, right? Saying, hey, I don't agree with this, and if you're not going to change, fuck it. I guess I'm not going to be a cop. I'm not going to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be an accomplice.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. This was fun.
People are you active on social media or anything?
I have social media. I'm barely ever active.
Yeah. I mean, if I wasn't in media, I wouldn't be on social media at all, because it's a waste of time, but that's where everybody's at.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I do a lot of viewing, but me, myself, I hardly ever post anything.
A lot of people do that, right? Most people.
Yeah,
I mean, I know Rocio, my wife, like she's on social media, but she doesn't post. She just but she gets everything from social media, but she never posts anything.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm a Moris or am I Reen? I don't know, on Instagram. But
all right,
I never post.
I'll let you know when this is up. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being an ally, man. You're a good teacher, and good luck, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Take it easy.
Bye.